Hello guys, first of all, welcome and thank you all for joining Digital Futures workshop as our guest crits and students. Just to introduce our guest crits, here we have Roland Snooks, who is a lab director and associate professor at RMIT Tectonic Formation Lab, also co-founder of Kokuja, and Nick Bao, who is a lecturer at RMIT Architecture, who is almost finishing his PhD with multi-agent based structural optimization with BSO, and founder of FormX. And it would be great if Sumin could introduce Igor.
Igor is a professor in Bartlett, UCL, and he has been my partner. Igor, do you wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. I guess it's very late in LA. So as Sumin said, I'm a lecturer at the Bartlett UCL, where I'm teaching at Bartlett B Pro Master Program. So I'm based in London, where I also lead my own small design and research practice in addition to that.
Great, welcome guys. So before we start, I'll briefly introduce myself and the scope of this workshop. I am currently doing a PhD under Roland Snooks, focusing on highly complex fibrous formation findings through robotic and 3D printing carbon fiber. This workshop is one of the workshops in Digital Futures that introducing to Korean community to computational design methodologies and processes. This workshop was joint with KICDT, Korean Institute of Computation Design and Technology, to showcase the computational fields to Korean students, as in Korea, they are mostly traditionally influenced architectures. So bear in mind that some of the students are not hugely great with languages. So this workshop is a lineage of the research that is happening at RMIT Architecture, Tectonic Formation Lab, where we focus on emergent bottom-up processes and technology applications through computational designs and robotic and self-organizing multi-agent systems. Roland would describe so much better than me, but I'll just go through quickly and let others know about the scope of the lab. This workshop has two scales of research: a study of strange and weirdness of objects using Houdini and bottom-up emergence techniques that comes out from the codes, and on architectural chunk studies that shows implication of these emergences and combining with top-down authorship and the restrictions through painterly operations. The participants would then go through through understandings of parameters of generative design and multi-agent systems and how they affect the global and micro scale of these objects, and generating what they think is strange into objects through ideas of John Ruskin ornamentations and grotesque from finding. Some of the works from the participant experience are shown here. And these are some of the parameter studies. So from there, they will generate a topologically complex designs through top-down modeling, showing different types of characteristics and blurring the boundaries of different architectural typologies. And understanding the scale transitions in detail to overall formation finding and how they relate to one and another. And also understanding the restrictions of architectural typologies. And also these are some of the students' work, and also studying about the colorations of these. As it was only for a week, we didn't have enough time to focus on the fabrication of these objects using advanced fabrication and diagramming of these tectonic fabrication methods. So this is all for the introduction. I will hand over to first participants. Jong-Wook Park, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen now.
I will share my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and also welcome Hanjun for coming to this workshop.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, then I will start my presentation. First of all, thank you for all the crits for spending such a precious time. And on this presentation, I'm going to talk about what I learned from these 7 days of workshop. On this workshop, I mainly learned how to use Houdini and also ZBrush or like Brille. So this presentation will begin from introducing GIF images that I made by using Houdini. Before I started making GIF images, I wanted these images to move based on certain rules. So I chose increase, decrease, and rotation as rules and applied each of them at each of the image. And as you can see, all the models in each image works on certain rules that I mentioned. So the first image moves on based on the rule of increase. The second one moves based on the rule of rotation, and the last one moves based on the rule of decrease. Then I moved on to the next tab, which is designing various chairs only by changing the numbers on given parameters. And from this test, I selected myself certain type, which has the most adequate variation and complexity, and this is the selected type. And from this selection, I used the same parameters of the selected type that I just mentioned to the different base models and expected that the same visual variations and complexity could be found. However, when I tested, the results were quite much different from my expectations. So I changed the numbers on given parameters, and these images you're seeing are the results. So what I tried to do with these images are the same as I just mentioned, making complexity while also making variations. Then I started designing on larger scale, which is pavilion. When I was designing pavilion, I only had one goal, to make it look dynamic. So what I've done is to make various curvatures on pavilion so that it looks more dynamic. In case of this design, I rotated the modules in this pavilion on different angles so that different curvatures could be made. And you can see the curvatures in detail from the zoom in image of the pavilion. And this is the zoom in image. After that, I thought that the pavilion can be more dynamic if I also make high curvature on the base model itself. So in case of this design, I intentionally made high curvature on base model and also rotated the modules in pavilion like I've done on previous design. And here's the detailed images showing high curvatures of the base model and curvatures from the modules. Next, I also designed the bridge. And on this design, I wanted it to look scary or somewhat like grotesque. So I designed module which is similar to the scar itself. And since each module is perforated, if you zoom out and look at the whole bridge, it may like induce trypophobia, like something like that. And if you see the zoom in image, you may notice that each module resembles a scar, that it makes the bridge look a little bit scary. And lastly, I designed architecture chunk by using Rhino Softy and Houdini. If you carefully see the chunk, you may notice that there are stairs, like slabs, observatory, and hallway, which can be found on many conventional buildings. However, even though this chunk doesn't resemble the conventional buildings, you may notice that it still has the elements that most conventional buildings have. And this is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening to my presentation.
Great, thank you. I'll hand over to our guests now. Maybe Roland might go first.
Yeah, sure. Look, first of all, I think it's a really impressive amount of work to produce in a single week, and I think the quality of that work is very high for somebody who's just sort of entering into this world. So I think I'd like to start by congratulating you, and also and to you, Alan, for the teaching, obviously. Look, I think what I'm always really interested in this work is how design intention works in collaboration with the generative tools. And so I'm always interested to understand how the students, I guess how the students understand their own intention and the way it relates to the tools they're using, and whether or not the intention they're putting into these tools is coming through in the end result, or whether the students feel like this is something where it's a black box where they can't control it, and it's always going to produce things which have the same types of characteristics. So I guess that's a question. I wonder if you could address that.
So students were able to control certain amount, but not mostly. Sometimes it's somewhat unintentional, and they think it's meeting their criteria of these architectural works. So they choose certain stuff that wasn't intentional, which is pretty much emergence of the code that we created. And therefore, it's like, a balance between somewhat intentional and intentional, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it'd be really good to hear from the student. Could you tell us what was your experience in terms of how you understood your relationship between the things that you were trying to do and the things that you actually created through your collaboration with these generative tools?
I personally think that the unexpected results that comes from like computational methods are the charm of this kind of design methods, because even though I think like these parameters may end up like this kind of design sometimes, and most of the times the designs aren't as much as I expected, but from those unexpected designs, I start to think in different ways or in broad ways. So I think this kind of study was quite interesting, because when I use Houdini, there is base model and there's like modules that I can aggregate. And most of the time when I do the aggregation, the results were very much different from my expectation. And that was just interesting for me, and it was good. Yeah.
Well, I think those studies were good. The one, I guess, main comment about those aggregation studies is that, I mean, this is a technique that we work on a lot in the lab and our teaching. And one of the criteria we have for it is to try and get what we describe as a synthetic relationship between the scale of the object and like the scale of the component and the scale of the overall object. So in the studies that you showed, you very much read the completed form as an aggregation of a whole lot of small elements, where you can read the underlying base geometry. I think what's really interesting in this process is when those things start to blur. When you start to blur the reading as to whether or not this is something which is an aggregation of elements, or whether it's a unified form which perhaps is subdivided into various different levels of detail and variation. And I think right now yours sits at this scale where all the components are very small. So I would try and scale those things up, and then try and create a sympathy between the character of the components and the character of the underlying geometry. But this is something which takes quite a long time to sort of to fine tune those sort of aesthetic responses. But anyway, I'll conclude by saying I think it was strong work for a single week.
Great, thanks, Roland. Any from the crowd?
Thank you for the work as well. Great presentation, and great to see what you managed in 1 week, essentially with a new tool. And I would agree with Roland's comments that kind of the interesting results emerge when we start kind of losing the understanding of what was exactly the process here, right? When it kind of goes back to, you're talking about these kind of unexpectancy and a bit of mysticism in the process, where I think it's interesting when the results also start communicating that, right? That when the results are not so straightforward. And I think maybe what you were doing something like that in some of those like chair studies. And I think that that was something very interesting in your work, and that you could then kind of start bringing also to, larger scale and some of the subsequent studies that you were doing of architectural chunks. So like that would be my encouragement. But otherwise, I think it was a great production for 1 week, right?
Thanks, Igor.
Yes, thanks, Park, for the presentation. It's great to see the work and your results within 1 week. Also, a very smart process from the weird geometry to the furniture, small scale furniture design, then to the space design. But also, when we run the similar studio at MIT, we also have some problem with you set up the chair form first, then run the agent or algorithm on the existing form, or you're using the algorithm to generate a new form or new typology of the chair or space. This is
I'm not sure if I understood the question was right, but what I've done is that the base models were the conventional ones, the stuff like the chairs were something that we used to know, and I aggregated the other elements to the conventional world. So the chair itself isn't something new or some kind of new design.
yeah. So you originally you give this chair the very early design domain, then you run the agent on the surface, right? And
Yes,
then
yes.
in the future, you're using the algorithms to generate a new typology of the chair or the space. This is my question. Yeah.
Alan, I'm so sorry.
Maybe I'll join into that question, right? So as of 1 week, we didn't have enough time to. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of a. Sorry. So we didn't have enough time for in a week to create a code that actually does all those restrictions for base geometry. So I actually give them the code of what to do, and it's a lot more easier and more freedom to design what they want in a top-down approach of the subdies. So I told them to do it in that direction. But if we have more time, then obviously, of course, we would love to do both, and how they two different types of algorithms or different types of processes, how interlock or how interweave with each other. Hanjun?
Oh, well, I mean, mostly similar comment. But anyway, I mean, thanks for the work. I like the in 1 week. I mean, such a great result, I'll say as well. Well, I mean, maybe I just wanted to see a little bit more of the cataloging of your experiments, maybe like in the end of your presentation. Like, I mean, you had such a good result, but meantime, like I just want to see like how you get to the final result in the end. Like, yeah, maybe I'm sure that you should have like the different experiment or different tests within that. So if we could compare with it, maybe, yeah, it could be more interesting. Yeah, that's from my side.
Great. Thank you. So we'll go to next participants. Solayu. Whenever you are ready.
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Yep. Go for it.
Hello, my name is Sorayu. I'm very honored to meet you all of you, and nice to meet you. And it's a great honor to be received the critics.
Sorry, before you start, can you make it into a full screen?
Okay. I'm a student of first semester of master's degree who is studying computational design in Korea. I'm studying in generative design among the computational design, and I participated in this workshop because I want to gain experience in wide range of computational design using Houdini. Nice to meet you, and let's start. First, I tried the image with coloring according to the noise and rotate value. I chose it because I liked the image that I first encountered in Houdini and gave the thickness of the line to object it and seemed to fly upward. The second design that I wanted to make using object is a design that was inspired by the flower petals. I designed the petals as an object, and I made a figure that moved in a circle through noise and rotation. I like to design that show the color under the influence of the rotate value, and it was impressive that each color become a petals as whole. The third one was studying using curved surface. I designed a figure whose curved surface become a roof and looks like a pavilion. And we created an architectural chunks by adjusting the noise value. Next is a GIF image. It was a kind of the test level work, and the first thing I wanted to show you was expansion of the bar as a component. The next task was to start with a donut subdi, enter the component, and fine-tune the scaling to fit the scale of one component. Next is a complex topology study. While studying, I always liked the design that Hadid slab and column architecture design were organically connected and connected like flowing water. In the meantime, it was impressive that the flower function, the wall function, and the structure function were perfect. So I tried to design for this project, but I couldn't complete this design while I was working because my computer lacked a lot of performance. Unfortunately, I couldn't complete the complex topology, but I learned that I need to adjust the details by directly experiencing the change in the parameter value and understanding of the computational design. While working on it for a week, I learned a lot from online tutor, and I thought I should learn more from now on. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you. I'll head over to our crits.
Maybe I'll start by saying that I think maybe it was the second image you showed, the very thin surface with the white network of geometry. I think that was perhaps if you can go back to that image.
두 번째 이미지로 한번 가봐 주시겠어요?
The next one.
이미지 맞나요?
After this. 이거 다음 거예요.
Yeah, so I think it's a very beautiful piece of geometry. Obviously, it has part of the same problem that I was discussing with the previous student, where the underlying surface is really evident. So it would be really nice in this type of project if this sort of fine filigree starts to get teased out and separated out, becomes more fibrous and perhaps thicker, and starts to blur the relationship between articulation and form. That could be a slightly more ambiguous relationship between the two. But I think what you've done at a small scale is it's really very compelling geometry. It's got really interesting differentiation across it, and I think it's really really good demonstration of how you take the techniques and software that Alan's introducing and work out ways in which you can curate that in and guide that into creating something which is aesthetically beautiful and in its own way highly resolved. So I think that's a really compelling piece of geometry for such a short workshop.
Maybe to other crits, if anyone has any other comments.
I think, yeah, also thank you very much for sharing your work with us. I think it was interesting how at the end, when you were describing the surface which you modeled and which you didn't have the computational power to kind of run the simulation on top, you were mentioning that you were trying to make it perfect, which I found kind of an interesting statement, right? Like how perfect do you really want to get in the stage of the modeling, right? I think like what would be great for you to get out of this workshop is that, you know, you are through this computational process, you are kind of outputting results which you can evaluate in a certain way, and some are going to be more perfect than others based on a certain criteria, right? And all of these criterias, you know, are not equal, right? So what would it mean that to create this perfect volume, right? Maybe your perfect volume is not perfect for someone else, but based on a certain criteria, right? And I think that's always important to, when you're evaluating these computational models, what is your criteria of evaluation? Based on what you are ranking some of the results as more successful than others, right? And I think like that's kind of what you can understand that you get from this computational power and these kinds of processes where you have a lot of control over different types of parameters, right? So I would just kind of give that as my comment or a general suggestion, right, as you go forward.
Great, thank you for this precious feedback. Anyone else?
Yeah, thanks, Yo. Yeah, I think that this image and geometry is quite nice, and also thanks for the presentation and the great work in the past week. And this project also have quite a lot potential to develop into the real building scale, because it has the vertical and horizontal space. And later, I think you can also try the different geometry of the space to matching the, if you want to move to the large scale of the building components and have more characters of the functions of a building. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I also was thinking about the sale almost same as a Nick, because like I mean, I really like your sculptures, but maybe one thing I liked from the previous the presentation was about he was trying to get some kind of shape of the pavilions and as well as the bridges. So maybe, I mean, I'm not saying that yours is not good, but I'm saying like maybe next step, like I know that 1 week is such a short time to experiment. It's just one concept as well. So maybe, yeah, if you want to develop more about your code and script, yeah, maybe you could have a go more about maybe, yeah, it could be a little bit of architectural stuff or more structural stuff as well. I mean, just have a fun.
Yep, thanks, Hanjun. Maybe thank you for this presentation, and maybe we'll next to the head. Next participants, may Sumin Han.
Is it already me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here until now. Let me share my screen. So I was, do you see my screen well? Do you see my presentation? Okay. So yeah, I really enjoyed this tutorial. Like I really enjoyed the portion of Houdini, how it can really handle massive amount of meshes, and then also like I kind of feel like I improved my skills in ZBrush as well. So this is my journey. I was asked to make 9 components, and like each of them took me like 2 to 4 hours. And I would try to negotiate, like if I can reduce it, like Alan asked us to do 32 in the beginning. And I kind of reduced it to 9. So each of them I always try to make them all different. So in the beginning, we were given a really interesting Houdini script. Really, we can kind of generate some really interesting maths. And this was my first trial of that. And I made a video. I've managed to make a video out of it. Thank you so much for sharing that tutorial with us. And sorry, let me do this again. And another one, I continued, and like because this was starting from a sphere, we wanted to make it from another kind of really interesting geometry. So I just used my geometry from other, like I kind of recycled one of the old one, adapted to this project, and like it was really exciting to kind of see how massive amount of components can grow from my geometry. So I thought that was really cool. And then I also started to aggregate with components, as this Houdini thing can really do. So this was my another trial that I couldn't manage to do it. I wanted to do it today. This was the first trial, and also Alan told us how to paint this in ZBrush really interestingly. So I tried that as well. So it also uses like cavity and peak and valley to paint different colors. So I was really interested in to trying that. And then another one I really tried was to have this kind of like really weird component with eye and tail. So in this one, I had kind of a weird problem that eye and tail has to be a separated geometry in ZBrush in order to paint it. So in the first trial, I just meshed everything. Although I could really paint it really differently, but I couldn't have this kind of like different qualities. And then on next tutorial, after Alan reviewed, I knew how to group it now, and then like give different colors with different parts of the object. So I was really having lots of fun with this workshop. But that's where I got it. And then as an architectural proposal, I kind of pushed it in this stage. So it's the same model, same base model. It was already made for kind of a architectural base mesh. So it's about like applying different kind of details or textures. So why I was doing this, because I was also doing some kind of small ceramic or foam-based project with my student at SIAC. So maybe we can try a little bit of a tile or a portion of this thing to try really make it. So that's something that I was really excited about. Yeah, so that's it.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Simin. Thank you for your presentation. I'll hand over to our guest, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue. Very nice to see you. It's always really fascinating for me to see, I see another really experienced designer take on some of these kind of strategies we've been working on, and to see what you're going to do with it, albeit in a very short period of time. But one of the things that we've been trying to do with this type of strategy for a while is focus on different types of ambiguity. So ambiguity between part and whole, or between surface form and articulation. But one of the ones that's most interesting, maybe, to yourself and Igor, is this relationship between the discrete and the continuous that operates within this. This is obviously an aggregation of discrete parts. It works, it's a algorithmically discrete thing. But what we always try and do with this work, and also in the kind of larger things we produce in the lab, like the kind of the large installation projects that you would have seen, those projects are always trying to blur almost a connection between them. And realizing that if you start to blur or undermine that connection, then they start to read as something that's continuous and undermines the sort of part-to-whole relationship. If you do less of that, they read as much more discrete things. And so it gets to a certain point where you realize that perhaps the difference in this dichotomy comes down to a very small level of the way something is detailed. Anyway, I don't know. Perhaps, I don't know if that's something you thought about when you were playing around with these things.
Igor, do you have any answer?
No, I find this really interesting what Roland said, because that's something that I was always interested about in your work and that you guys do at the lab. And from what I've seen from your work, sometimes it's just so obvious through the material system that you have to use, right? And I find it interesting that what we're seeing here with this method, it kind of can absorb different types of material systems, while remaining, let's call it, pure on a computational level, is essentially discrete the way you want it. But then you can't really fight the material at the end, right? It becomes what it needs to become, right? When you were making those beautiful kind of bent wire sculptures, obviously that's sort of a, in material sense, also a discrete system bent by robots and so on. Whereas these, the latest metal prints and the other one where I think you were infilling, like that's kind of a more of a continuous system in a material sense, right? And I just find that kind of interesting, that there's enough room for it to absorb from the computational side. The model can absorb different kinds of material systems and sort of not worry that much if it's discrete or continuous. It is what it needs to be for the given materiality.
Yeah, and it's a little bit about the integrity of the individual part. Like, as you're saying, with the wire bent things, the parts are discrete. They have to be, really, because that's the scale of the wire. With the metal printed pieces, we print those pieces, like each component is about a meter tall, maybe 1.2 meters, and we print them as almost separate discrete elements and join them. But some of the joins are bolted where they're expressed. Some of them are actually welded and they're kind of blurred between one and another. But the actual point that you start one print and stop the next print doesn't relate to any sort of discrete nature of the individual component or the sort of ideological position. It's simply like, where is the most logical spot for 3D printing to stop something, which has actually got to do with draft angles, and it's got to do with like angles of connection and a whole lot of things that have nothing to do with the conversation we're having now, which is just purely about like pragmatics. And so I guess by going through that, you sort of realize that a lot of this is really, you know, it's, as you say, it's material driven set of concerns, not a kind of ideological or computational relationship. Anyway, that's sort of probably getting off the topic too much today for the but anyway, it was exciting for me to see Sumin, to see you have a crack at doing these things.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting conversation, but I think maybe it's a long conversation, maybe not for today. Yeah, but I feel like there are interesting methodologies for generating design, and I really appreciate how you in your lab also like a lot of other people follow this kind of methodologies to really try to materialize these kind of aesthetics, and that kind of effort is really important for people like us really want to push for kind of interesting design methodologies to kind of have a mean to fabricate these weird geometries. And like, I think there were like 10 something years that we were just like designing, and there is no mean to fabricate them. And it's really interesting to kind of see that kind of push coming from your lab in that kind of sense, in a lot of the kind of aspects. So I think it's really interesting that we have this workshop here, also in Korean language group, and we had a lot of fun. I hope it's very useful, and like it also has some good influence to get another, you know, that this kind of interest is not just staying in that kind of English language group. Yeah, so there is some kind of also other impact as well. So in that sense, I really want to thank you, Roland and Nick and Igor and Hanjun for joining this workshop, and of course, Alan for giving us this workshop from the beginning.
Great, thanks, Sumin. Anyone else in the chat that have some other comments?
I think we have one more student, no?
Yes, we have one more student. If not, then I'll hand over to Juyeon Lee, who is our last participant, who will be presenting this workshop. And just a reminder that I'll be translating all this interesting topic of conversations at the end to students as well, so stick around.
I'm Juyeon, currently a senior in architecture at Hong University.
Sorry, before start, can you make it into a full screen?
Pardon?
전체 화면 만들어 주시겠어요?
잠시만요.
Control L.
Thank you. I'm Juyeon, currently a senior in architecture at Hong University. First, this image is in. I adjusted various parameters and looked at which value were appropriate for what I wanted to create the design. For this, I use the distance between points variable related to the noise value and variables related to the point connection, and so on. You can see that the characters forming the shape are given differently by each variable. Based on the analysis shown in the previous slide, I tried to combine two different characters into one form. Then I made this design by dividing the points into two categories based on a cell length range and assigning them other variables. This slide shows the results of adjusting various parameters to make this design. This is detail shot, and this is two. I tried various things like this and applied them to design an object. I would be intended to a jellyfish's head by highlighting different characteristics between inside and out. This is the resulting object, and this is sequence. And based on the criteria taken from the noise value, I designed the object by dividing it into two categories and giving it different characteristics. This is sequence for this object. This time, based on the I tried to design an object by putting components instead of lines. I create the shape of an octopus circle as a component and attempted to show the intention in the final object. These images in this slide are what I designed at this workshop. This is a clip of an architecture chunk expressed in line. I took shape when the frame was full and proceeded with the final design. Finally, it is an architecture chunk designed with components. I divided it into two categories without the noise value. Then I put different components in this detail shot. This is detail image. Thank you for listening my presentation.
Thanks, Julian. I'll hand over to our guest, Chris.
So shall I start this time? All right. So thanks a lot again for the presentation. I think it's a tremendous amount of work and some really beautiful images at the end. I think like this image and just this model in particular, I think it actually kind of picks up on some of the things that were said a bit earlier in the earlier presentations of kind of blurring this boundary of recognizability of kind of underlying surface or the certain components which are aggregated. What I would maybe just give as a suggestion, maybe in the future work when you do something like this, when you're iterating, like when you were showing some of your earlier models, the kind of the white ones, I would just encourage you to be a bit more playful or brave in those iterations. Seems like you were a bit too precious not to ruin the model, if you know what I mean, right? So all of the iterations look very, very similar, whereas what you actually want to do is kind of push the system to the limit and see when it breaks, right? So you know how far you can go, and then work within those boundaries and just be a bit more brave when playing with the different parameters, rather than, you know, being afraid that it's going to break the system, right? Otherwise, I think it was really kind of great progression then from those early studies to the images that we see here on the screen. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Igor. Do you have anything to say, Juyeon?
한국말로 말해도 되나요?
Yes, I'll translate for you. Yep, go for it.
딱히 할 말 없고 좋은 제안 주신 것 같아서 앞으로 거의 발전 방향 때 그런 제안해 주신 방향으로 디자인을 진행해 보려고 합니다.
So what she's saying is that she's going to it's like she's going to say that she's going to understand your feedback and try to develop it more further in next days or so, I guess. And she says thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Wow, thank you for your work. Yeah, and then I really like the last. I mean, like Igor said, I mean, I really like the your couple of images. And then like one of the good things of your design is like because you're trying combining with the different components, and I think it was good try, for example, like so. And then before that, you also had some kind of like you divided when you tried with the jellyfish, you tried with the outside and the inside with the different components, and I think it was kind of like really good try. Yeah, so. And then, so maybe if you after that if you can combine the ideas which Igor suggested, like it'll be, I think, I'm sure that you're gonna have a really good result. Yeah, again for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with the two. It's a bit sad that Roland had some other commitments, so he left during your presentation. But I totally agree with both that I like the ambiguity of different types of components and how its underlying surfaces and geometries are kind of blurred. So you can't see much of the differentiation in between the two. And it's quite successful in the last two images that orange one and this one, those two are really successful ones. So great job, thank you. And that's pretty much it. So let's clap our hands to say thank you for both of the crits. 3 of the crits, sorry. Oh, Nick, do you want to say something? I totally forgot about you.
Yeah, it's fine. So thanks, Kyeong, right? Yeah, thanks, Kyeong, for the presentation. My previous bachelor studio, I told with Hassan Mohammed at MIT, is quite similar methodology. Play with the agent bodies, then make some aggregations, creating the large space or architecture components. So what I can give you the suggestion in the future is, you can see a lot of the components you're using the same scale of the components. So what we suggest our student to do is using the different scale of the same agent bodies. So in the lower part of the building, you can using some heavy and large agent body, but large scale. On the top one, you can use some light and small scale, but you can still use the same agent bodies. So I think it will creating a different dynamic of the algorithm grew up. So I think that you can try this methodology, and I think it will be helpful.
Great, thank you, Nick. That's really valuable comments for me to proceed next workshops or how I proceed this process as. And once again, thank you all for joining. I know everyone's.
How about some student comments?
Oh yes, I was gonna say that after, but yes. Anyone else like? Do you wanna say anything about this workshop or all the feedbacks that you received today? You can say it in Korean, so I can just translate it for them too.
어, 한국말로 제가 먼저 얘기를 할까요?
네.
네, 마지막 한 분이 원래 한지훈 씨는 그 수업을 통해서 알고 계셨고, 그래서 제가 원래 한수민 씨 작업도 열심히 뭔가 레퍼런스 많이 보면서 공부를 한 학생인데, 이번에도 같이 워크숍 듣게 되어서 뭔가 사실 이거 맨 마지막 아키텍처 청크를 만들 때 한수민 교수님께서 좀 더 빨리 진도를 나갔다고 생각하거든요. 그거를 보고 좀 도움이 많이 됐던 것 같아요. 어떻게 마지막 결과물을 나아가야 하는지 그런 방향성에 대해서. 그래서 그런 것도 좋았고, 다 같이 함께 작업물을 공유하면서 피드백 같이 듣는 과정이 좋아서 이번 워크숍으로 많은 걸 얻은 것 같습니다. 그래서 네, 감상평 같은 걸 얘기하려고 했어요.
Yes, so what she said was she was happy that Sumin actually joined as participant. Well, and for me, I was super honored at first that I thought she knew everything about these kind of, algorithmic processes. So I was like shocked at first, and I wasn't sure if she was actually the actual Sumin, or if somebody else is catfishing her, But I actually texted her asking if she is the actual one to be sure. But yeah, it was really valuable that she actually joined here. And also she said that sharing feedback throughout the participants was really valuable for her. So yeah, she had fun pretty much.
Thank you. I learned so much.
Thank you.
From everybody. Yes.
Great, thanks. So as everyone else, so the guest crit lives pretty much everywhere in the world, so I'm gonna let them go first, as I don't know the times that they are currently having. So thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you again next time in the future. And Nick, I'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thanks, Igor. Thanks, Sanjun.
Bye-bye.
Yep, thanks for inviting, and yeah, thank you for your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are we staying here a little bit?
Yeah, we will be having a debrief session.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'm
Great.
gonna leave. Have fun.
Right.
Thank you so
Same
much.
here. Bye.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
네, 혹시 조금 많이 어색했을 수도 있는데 진짜 좋은 피드백을 많이 받아서
아니 근데
고맙고.
여러분들 영어 너무 잘하시는데요?
네, 다들
왜
잘하시는데
안 한다 그러셨어요?
그러니까 너무 잘하시는데
너무 잘하시는데 진짜 깜짝 놀랐는데.
진짜 그러니까요. 굳이 트랜슬레이션이 필요 없을 것 같았는데 그래서 별로 안 했어요. 일단 그리고 먼저 제가 하고 싶은 말은 하루 동안 엄청난 작업들을 해주셔서 진짜 감사하다는 말을 드리고 싶고요. 먼저 어제랑 어마어마하게 차이가 많이 나서 깜짝 놀랐어요. 그래가지고 진짜 감사하다는 말씀을 드리고 싶고 혹시 이런 워크숍을 통해서 조금 이런 다양한 방법론도 있다라는 걸 조금이나마 아셨으면은 알아가는 게 있었다라면 저는 개인적으로 이 워크숍에선 성공이라고 생각을 하고 그렇습니다. 그 피드백 제가 조금 알려드리기 전에 혹시 뭐 하고 싶은 말씀이나 있으신가요?
그 다른 건 모르겠는데 저희 그 구글 드라이브 있잖아요.
네.
그게 우리가 뭐를 쓸 수는 없어요. 받을 수는 있는데.
네.
네, 그래서 우리 지금 오늘 작업한 거 어디에 올려야 되나요?
그거 제가 새로 해서 만들어 드릴게요. 지금 그거는 제가 개인용이라 제대로 돼 있는 링크를 제가 해서 드릴 테니까 그거 작업물들 혹시 마지막 이미지라든지 라이노 파일이라든지 후디니 파일 같은 거는 제가 직접 호명을 해가지고 제가 부탁을 드릴게요. 그래야지 제가 며칠 뒤에 디지털 퓨처스 영상 만들어야 돼서 그거를 합쳐가지고 보내야 되는 게 있어서 그것만 하려고 조금 이따 제가 이메일은 다시 드릴게요.
그냥 여기 계신 분들은 진짜 그냥 되게 열정적으로 파티시페이트 해주시는 분들이라 문제는 없겠지만 제 경험으로는 워크숍 끝나면은 그냥 빠이빠이거든요. 그래서 선생님 입장에서는 그냥 오늘 다 받으셔야 돼요.
그러면은 제가 오늘 당장 당장 카톡을 보내서 당장
근데 학생들 입장에서도 아무튼 그러니까 오늘 그냥 빨리 보내버리긴 할 거예요. 안 그러면은 나중에 뭐 보내달라고 물론 여기 계신 분들은 정말 다 보내주시겠지만
네, 너무 이 마지막에 계신 마지막 네 분 너무 감사드리고요. 다들 이렇게 한 명씩 사라지시더니 그런데 너무 열심히 해주셔서 감사드린다는 말씀을 드리고 싶고 전체적으로 이번 피드백이 어떤 내용이었냐면 약간 롤랜드가 말한 내용들은 MMO라는 개념을 주로 많이 사용을 하시거든요. 앰비규얼이. 그래가지고 전체와 객체 모호되는 관계 뭐 아니면은 계속 연관성과 하나의 객체들의 어떤 관계가 생기는지 아니면은 디자이너가 만든 약간 강제성과 좀 코딩이 만드는 생각지도 못한 랜덤니스? 약간 그런 거에 대한 MMO라는 관계성을 되게 중요시 하셔서 그런 이야기를 계속 쭉 나왔어요. 그래가지고 ambiguity, part and whole, discrete and continuous, articulation and discrete 약간 이런 개념들이거든요. 그래가지고 그런 개념이 관심이 있으시다면 여러 가지 책들이 있어서 제가 나중에 뭐 보내드릴 수도 있으니까 시간 나시면 보시면 좋을 것 같고 그래서 그런 두 가지의 특수성들이 어떻게 바뀌는지라는 생각을 했었고 그래서 이거 분이 약간 그거는 매트리얼 재료를 통해서 나오지 않냐 너네 작업은 약간 이런 식으로 말을 해줘가지고 저도 생각지도 못한 답변이어서 되게 재밌게 들었고요. 그래서 material driven, not about ideologies 약간 이런 식으로 이야기를 하고 계시는 것 같아서 저도 계속 이야기를 하고 싶었는데 그러기에는 시간이 부족해서 일단 넘어갔고 그러고 그 ambiguity라는 개념은 코딩에서만도 올 수가 없고 그 G브러쉬에서 탑다운 개념도 절대로 올 수가 없어요. 그 두 개가 얽히고 설켜야지 나오는 작업물인데 그래가지고 조금 종욱 씨하고 소라 씨가 조금 아쉬운 점이 G브러쉬를 많이 안 하셔가지고 약간 그 애매모호라는 개념이 조금 약하지 않았나라는 개인적인 생각이 들어요. 그래서 시간이 나신다면 꼭 그 G브러쉬 튜토리얼은 올라가 있으니까 그거 한 번씩 해보셔서 하시면은 좀 괜찮은 거가 나오지 않을까라는 개인적인 생각이고 수민 교수님 작품은 누가 봐도 한수민 교수님 색깔들이 정확하게 들어가 있어서 너무 재밌게
그래요?
봤고요. 네. 그래가지고 같은 코드하고 같은 프로세스를 드렸는데도 이렇게 사람에 따라서 다양하게 생각을 할 수가 있구나라는 걸 또 다시 한번 느꼈다는 생각이 들고 주연 씨 같은 경우는 마지막에 두 개의 이미지가 너무 잘 나와가지고 개인적으로 깜짝 놀랐어요. 그래서 그런 저희가 말하고 싶은 그런 애매모호라는 관계들이 너무 잘 나와가지고 초반 작업에는 살짝 그게 부족했는데 후반이 갈수록 점차 그게 잘 나오면서 G브러쉬가 들어가면서 그게 너무 잘 나와서 재밌게 느꼈고 닉이 마지막에 말한 내용이 컴포넌트에 대한 스케일들이 바뀌면서 그런 거에 대한 다양성도 나올 수 있다라는 걸 말을 해줬거든요. 그래서 그것도 제가 코드에 들어가 있긴 해요, 살짝. 근데 그게 언더라인 룰셋으로 들어가 있어가지고 약간 그 로테이션과 같이 이렇게 스케일들이 바뀌거든요. 근데 그거 대신에 그 친구는 스트럭처 위주로 하니까 그 스트럭처 얘기를 주로 했죠. 그래서 아래가 당연히 컴포넌트가 커야 되고 위로 갈수록 적어야 된다. 그건 당연한 그 로드 베어링 시스템의 기본 구조니까 그거에 대해서 설명을 하면서 약간 거기에 대한 더 아티큘레이션, 디자이너에 대한 인풋이 조금 더 들어가면 어떨까라는 피드백을 줘가지고 되게 재밌게 들은 것 같습니다. 혹시 하실 말씀 있으신가요? 여기까지가 제 피드백과 뭐 약간 이거에 대한 총평인 것 같고.
혹시 제 피드백 중에 그 닉바워 그 이제 크리틱 분이 하신 말씀을 제가 이해를 잘 못했어가지고 질문하셨던 게 혹시 어떤 내용인지 알 수 있어요?
잠시만요. 적어놓긴 했는데 스케일비가 그 언더라인 지오메트리가 너무 잘 보인다라는 피드백이었어요. 전반적으로 내용이. 그래서 스케일이 조금 더 컴포넌트의 스케일들이 커지거나 더 작아지고 더 약간 그 파라미터들을 조금 더 자세하게 조정을 하면서 디테일들이 바뀌어서 지브러쉬가 되면은 그런 컴포넌트들이 사라지잖아요. 약간 그러거나 지브러쉬든지 아니면 제가 호디니 마지막에 스크립트 들렸던 그 두 개 그 폭으로 바꾼 다음에 다시 메쉬로 바꿔가지고 형태 합쳐버리는 거 그거를 조금 해서 아웃풋이 나왔으면 어땠을까라는 생각이 저와 닉의 생각이었던 것 같습니다. 네.
저 그
네.
롤란 스무스님께서 말씀하신 부분을 잘 못 들어가지고 한번 말씀해 주실 수 있나요?
네. 소라 씨도 살짝 비슷한 피드백이었는데 그 언더라인 지오메트리, 즉 베이스 지오메트리가 너무 잘 보인다? 그래서 그 아티큘레이션이랑 형태가 너무 잘 보인다라는 게 전체적으로 그 얘기였고 맨 마지막에 이고시가 퍼펙션이라는 개념을 얘기하면서 그 소라 씨가 완벽성 막 이런 거를 얘기를 했잖아요. 그래서 시간이 없어서 약간 못했다. 컴퓨팅 파워가 없어서 못했다. 그거를 어떻게 더 이야기할 수 있냐면 이밸류에이션이랑 크라이테리아가 더 중요하다는 이야기를 했거든요. 그래서 제가 초반인가 중반에 말씀을 드렸는데 이런 컴퓨테이셔널 디자인, 컴퓨테이셔널 프로세스라는 게 어떻게 평가를 할 수 있을까라는 이야기가 계속 처음부터 지금까지 이 이야기가 나오는 토픽 중 하나예요. 그래서 이거를 어떻게 모든 이렇게 사람들마다 개인적인 주관적인 생각들이 있는데 그런 걸 어떻게 평가를 할 수 있느냐라는 토픽에서 발생이 된 거거든요. 그래가지고 약간 크라이테리아가 있었으면은 조금 더 좋았겠다. 그래서 그거를 이제 우리가 더 객관적이게 평가를 할 수 있지 않느냐라는 말 중 하나였어가지고 약간 그런 게 조금 더 뭐 나중에 개인 포트폴리오를 적을 때라든지 만들 때 그런 크라이테리아가 딱 있으면은 이제 평가분들이나 다 그런 것들을 볼 때 이제 잘했구나 못했구나라는 걸 정확하게 알 수가 있거든요. 그래서 그런 것들이 조금 더 들어갔으면 좋겠다라는 피드백이었고 그건 저도 많이 받아봤어가지고 그거를 계속 저도 생각을 하고 있는 부분 중 하나라서 그렇습니다. 그리고 하나가 더가 아무도 이야기를 아직 안 하셨는데 이거에 대한 답변도 생각을 하셨으면 좋겠어요. 일단 지프를 만들면 움직이잖아요. 거기에 대한 왜라는 질문을 꼭 생각을 하셨으면 좋겠거든요. 왜 움직이는지, 그리고 움직였을 때 어디서 멈췄는지, 왜 거기서 멈췄냐라는 피드백을 받으면은 이제 개인적으로 내가 좋아서라는 게 아니라 그런 이유가 정확하게 타당한 이유가 있으면 좋거든요. 그런 것이 바로 그런 피드백은 계속 20년 전에 그렉 린 애니메이트 폼이라는 책에서부터 나온 피드백이랑 그런 이야기들이라 그런 거에 대한 답변들이 정해져 있기는 한데 그래도 개인적이게 생각을 해서 그런 답변들을 보고 더 업그레이드를 한다든지 그러면 좋을 것 같습니다.
거기에 한마디만 붙여볼까요?
네.
그러니까 이게 멈췄을 때, 딱 멈췄을 때 그냥 사실 사람들이 진짜 내가 생각했을 때 정말 멋있어서 멈추긴 했어요. 근데 그거에 대한 내가 왜 이게 좋은지를 얘기하면 되는 거지. 이게 왜 로지컬하게 무슨 뭐 스랩이 돼야 되고 그런 게 아니에요. 그러니까 이게 왜 돼야 되는지가 아니라 내가 이거를 인투이티브하게 뭔가 나의 본능에서 사람의 본능이라는 게 되게 중요하거든요, 사실. 이게 수년간 트레이닝 된 그런 인포메이션이 그런 인투이션에 딱 나오는 건데, 사실 지금 요즘에도 보면 이제 AI라는 것 자체가 굉장히 많은 데이터를 집어 넣은 다음에 거기에서 디시전을 메이킹 하는 거잖아요. 그게 인투이션이라는 디지털 그러니까 컴퓨터한테 인투이션, 본능을 주는 과정을 AI라고 하잖아요. 그래서 우리가 뭔가 되게 에세릭하게 디시전 메이킹을 많이 하거든요, 사실. 그리고 내가 딱 멈췄을 때 진짜 좋은 디자이너들은 그냥 멈췄을 때 모르겠어. 그냥 이게 난 좋아. 근데 사실 그게 되게 여러 면에서 되게 타당성이 많아요. 예를 들어 좋은 디자이너들이 그렇게 고르면. 그래서 그 사람들의 디자인이 막 좀 따라지고 그러는 건데 그 사람들은 얘기를 잘 못해. 예를 들어서 우리가 DDP라는 그런 동대문이라는 이런 건물을 만들었어. 근데 그게 왜 그렇게 만들어야 되는지 잘 설명하는 사람도 잘 없어. 그리고 잘 설명을 잘 못해요. 그리고 그 디자인한 사람도 되게 인투이티브하게 디자인했기 때문에 얘기를 잘 못해요. 근데 그 어떤 면에서는 많은 것들이 그 본능에서 나오는 거기 때문에 근데 그거를 자기의 본능적으로 딱 감각적으로 딱 선택했을 때 이게 왜 타당성이 있는지 어느 정도 설명할 수 있는 그런 것들이 있으면 더 좋다. 이거를 말씀하시는 거예요. 왜냐하면은 예를 들어서 죄송해요 진짜 이거 왜냐하면은 이게 예를 들어서 이게 딱 멈췄잖아. 근데 어떤 사람이 그냥 잘 안 해본 사람이 딱 멈췄을 때 이거를 가지고 의자를 만들어? 그러면 넘어져요. 근데 이거를 많이 만들어 본 사람이 딱 멈추면은 이거를 그냥 3D 프린트해도 딱 그냥 의자처럼 딱 쓸 수가 있는 거야. 약간 그런 인투이션 그런 거를 그런 거를 좀 잘 설명할 수 있도록 이게 왜 내가 이걸 선택했는데 이게 왜 그랬지? 이거를 좀 트랙백해서 나의 인투이션이 어디서 왔는지 그거를 좀 알아가는 과정을 트레이닝을 하라는 거지. 이거를 뭔가 백핸드로 아무튼 뭔가 지금 말이 좀 너무 삼천포로 가긴 했는데 본능을 믿는 그런 거가 너무 그런 거를 로직이 너무 내가 설명할 방법이 없다고 해서 너무 그거를 주저하지 말고 그거를 왜 설명할 수 없는데도 내가 이걸 선택했는지 그거를 백으로 생각할 수 있는 그런 것들을 생각하는 것들이 좀 필요하다 이런 걸 좀 얘기하고 싶었어요.
네, 그래가지고 그런 것들을 조금 더 설명을 해드리자면 방법론 중에 리버스 엔지니어링이라는 방법론이 있어요. 그게 뭐냐면은 일단 만들어 내가 마음에 드는 걸. 그 다음에 그 이유를 찾는 거거든요. 그래가지고 그런 방법론도 있으니까 단순히 처음부터 끝까지 이렇게 하면은 좋겠지만 그런 거에 대한 약간 프로세스의 강박이라든지 그런 게 있으면 조금 어려울 수도 있거든요. 그래서 그 두 개의 프로세스가 자연스럽게 엮이면 더 좋겠다라는 생각이고요. 저도
맞아.
충분히 그렇게 생각을 합니다. 그런 인투이티브랑 약간 감각적인 부분도 절대로 무시할 수 없는 부분이기에 그 두 개가 잘 이제 조화가 되면 좋지 않을까라는 생각이고요. 뭐 그렇습니다. 어떻게 끝내야 될지를 모르겠는데 너무
너무 재밌는 수업이었어요. 감사해요.
네,
알른
감사합니다.
선생님, 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 네, 뭐 잘 따라와 주셔서 너무 감사하다는 말씀 드리고 싶고 제가 그 카톡으로 이제 뭐 파일들 부탁드릴 테니까 그 위치에다가 이제 저장을 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 아무튼 일주일 동안 고생 되게 많으셨고요. 혹시라도 계속 이런 거를 하고 싶으시면 저한테 연락 주시면은 제가 뭐 책이라든지 뭐 워크숍이라든지 그런 거는 진짜 많거든요. 진짜 유튜브에만 봐도 유명한 사람들 쭉 있어서 그런 분들만 봐도 되니까 충분히 제가 더 방향성을 제시해 드릴 수 있고 관심 있으신 분들은 그리고 뭐 계속 인연이 됐으면 좋겠어요. 단순히 이걸로 끝나는 게 아니라 그래가지고 간단하게 네, 그거를 말씀을 드리고 싶었는데, KICDT라는 혹시 그룹이 있는데, 안 들어오신 분들은 상관이 없지만, 카톡에도 있어요. 그래서 카톡에는 컴퓨테이셔널 디자인이라고 치면은 오픈 카톡방에 한 200분들 계시는데, 그분들이 다 한국이 아니라 뭐 미국, 유럽, 여기저기 런던, 뭐 호주, 여기저기에서 컴퓨테이셔널 하시는 분들이거든요. 그래가지고 진짜 네트워크가 어마어마해서 여기에 가입을 하시면은 되게 좋을 것 같습니다. 그래서 뭐 다른 분들이 뭐 어떤 방식으로 컴퓨테이셔널 하는지 네, 여기 적어 누르시면 돼요. 그래가지고 그렇게 하시면은 되게 좋은 방향성으로 좋을 것 같고 지금 컴퓨테이셔널 여기 유튜브 가시면은 되게 다양하게 워크숍이라든지 계속 그런 게 계속 올라오거든요. 그래서 그런 것들 계속 보셔서 다양하게 공부를 하시고 뭐 이런 방향도 있다, 저런 방향도 있다. 그래서 나의 길을 더 찾아가는 것도 중요하다고 생각을 해요. 진짜 여기서는 제가 하는 것뿐만 아니라 진짜 다양하거든요. 뭐 다타 비주얼라이제이션부터 시작해가지고 단순히 코딩만 하시는 분, 뭐 기타 등등. 그래서 솔직히 말해서 컴퓨테이셔널 디자인이 되게 영어로 된 부분들이 많고 중국어로 된 부분들이 정말 많아요. 그래서 한국어로 된 그룹은 여기밖에 없어서 여기를 조금 들어와서 참가를 하시면 되게 좋을 것 같습니다. 아무튼 그렇고요. 뭐 또 궁금한 거나 뭐 하실 말씀 있으신가요?
그냥 일단 우선 워크숍 너무 재밌었고 저도 근데 아쉬웠던 부분 중 하나가 지브러시를 못 쓴 부분이 아쉽긴 했는데 근데 반대로 후디니가 물론 이제 정해진 스크립트 안에서 제가 움직일 수 있는 거긴 하지만 그거를 후디니를 하면 할수록 제가 약간 이 스크립트만은 내가 그래서 조금씩 핸들이 된다는 느낌이 드는 것 같더라고요. 그래서 그러다 보니까 이게 너무 재밌어가지고 후디니만 계속 하다 보니까 맨날 시간이 부족하고 했었는데 이번에 다음에도 만약에 조금 더 이거 워크숍이랑 별개로 또 이제 튜토리얼들 다 강의를 다 다운받아 놔가지고 하면 계속 한번 지브러시까지 한번 해보면 재밌지 않을까 생각을 해봤고 또 저는 되게 좀 요즘 약간 이런 워크숍이나 작년 AAVS부터 시작해가지고 이번에 계속 KICDT 작년 못 듣긴 했는데 이번 디지털 퓨처스도 그렇고 되게 새롭다고 저는 생각을 하거든요. 이렇게 건축을 하는구나. 남들은 말이 안 되는 건축이라고 하지만 봤을 때 저는 이게 예전에 이남주 님이랑 또 한번 인터뷰 같은 걸 했었는데 그때도 말씀하셨던 게 이게 뭔가 핸드폰이랑 비교를 많이 하시더라고요. 그러니까 스마트폰이 나오기 직전에만 해도 사람들이 어떻게 핸드폰 인터넷을 하냐 하는데 그게 나오고 나서부터는 모두가 사용하는 것처럼 컴퓨테이션도 어느 순간 모두에게 받아들일 수 있는 모멘트가 생기면 그게 당연하게 받아들일 거라고 얘기를 많이 하셨었는데 그러니까 그런 어떻게 보면 우리 오늘 얘기 나왔던 앰비규티랑 마찬가지로 이렇게 좀 애매모호한 이런 공부들을 하는 게 저는 재밌어가지고 앞으로도 자주 뵐 수 있으면 좋겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 한국 들어가면 한번 봬요.
우리 맥주 치맥해요, 치맥.
좋습니다.
네.
혹시 다른 분들 할 말씀 있으신가요?
저 할 말 있는데요. 네, 일단 좋은 강의 해주셔서 너무 감사드리고 또 이제 건축과 디자인 분야에서 컴퓨테이셔널이라는 부분에 대해서 좀 더 알게 된 것 같고 어떻게 하게 되는지에 대해서 한 발짝 정도 알게 된 것 같아서 아주 감사드리고 이제 앞으로 이제 더 많은 노력과 시간을 투자해서 좀 더 알아가는 학생이 되도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 화이팅입니다.
아, 여기 그 유소라 씨도 그 이번에 그 KICDT에 발표해 주시면 좋을 것 같아요. 프로젝트 하나,
네.
그 예전에 했던 프로젝트 하나 좋은 거 그냥 골라가지고 발표 한번 해주세요.
KICDT에서요?
네.
아,
저희가
네.
발표자 모집하거든요. 그 알란 선생님도 저번에 발표해 주셨거든요.
네.
네.
아, 네, 한번
그래서,
해보겠습니다.
네. 네, 발표자를 해주세요. 궁금하네요. 어떤 옥하는지.
한번 이렇다 할 작업물이 없는데 한번 네.
혹시 연대에서는 작업물 어떤 걸 하나요? 지금 거기 랩에서는, 연구소에서는.
교수님 누구 교수님이세요?
저희 이대성 교수님 연구실에 있습니다.
그러면은 발표하셔야겠네.
지금 진행 중인 작업물은 진행 중인 프로젝트가 있긴 한데 그게 지금 7월 말쯤에 마감이 되어서
네.
한번 다듬어 보고 네, 고려해 보겠습니다. 좋은 제안 주셨는데 감사합니다.
네, 혹시 주현 씨는 마지막으로 하실 말씀 있으신가요? 마지막 학사분이신데 되게 어려운 프로세스 잘 따라와 주셔서 감사하다는 말씀 드리고 싶고 먼저 네, 뭐 그렇습니다.
네. 사실 제가 정욱 씨랑 개인적으로 친분이 있어가지고
저기 여기 지금 다 보면 그냥 이너 네트워크에 어차피 무슨 익스팬드 이런 거 없어. 이거 녹화하면서 보는 거를 그냥 기대해야 돼. 언젠가 누군가 녹화를 보겠지. 네.
그리고
주연님.
그 수민한 씨.
주연님 저희 이마밖에 안 보이긴 하거든요, 주연님.
제가 지금 안 씻어가지고 오늘 작업하느라.
네.
슬프네요. 네, 그래서
목소리로 기억할게요.
전 그 KICDT가 엄청 좋았던 게 그
발표해 주셨죠?
네네. 근데
네.
제일 앞 순서인가? 바로 김호경 씨셨어요.
맞아.
아마 제 기억
발표하셨죠. 맞아.
네. 근데 제가 제가 사실 소진이
그 파이버리한 그
네.
프로젝트 하셨던 걸 기억해요.
네네네. 저 기억납니다. 네. 이미 다 들어가 계시네요. KICDT 그러면. 이미 다 굳이 이야기할 필요가 없었네.
그렇네. 우리 여기 괜히 선전했네.
그러니까요.
아니에요. 괜찮아요. 우리 여기 이거 나중에 녹화 요거 뒤에 부분만